Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to talk about a project that I've been kind of working off and on for about a year and a half or so, 2 years. It actually started as I'm bored over Thanksgiving break kind of thing, and it kind of grew from there. And so what that project is using the Azure text-to-speech avatar to create interactive customer experiences for our marketing team at our events. So if you go to booth 338 today, you can actually interact with the demo we're going to show you today. So we're going to start with a little bit about myself. So I'm the chief architect for AI in our digital velocity practice at CDW. So that's the team that does a lot of software engineering, cloud, all the Azure stuff, and AI workloads as well. So enough about me. Let's talk about the Azure text-to-speech avatar. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the service and how you can kind of go in there and to the Speech Studio, show you where it's at, how to get started with it. And then we're going to dive into a demo. And then if we have time, we'll go over some code to show you kind of how it all works together and talk about some of the agentic workflows that are running the back end. So the Azure text-to-speech avatar, they offer lifelike avatars for your customer experience. They do offer custom avatars as well. And actually, I believe there's a new feature coming sometime soon where it makes the whole process of customizing it a bit easier. So in addition to the interactive avatars like we're going to show you today, it does also allow you to create avatar videos. So let's say you're doing a training session and you're like me and you don't like to hear your voice as people are doing their training. Or even sales videos. I just use the avatar or even the text-to-speech that's in Azure to do my content for me. The real-time action is what we're going to show today. Once you combine that with Azure OpenAI, models like GPT-4, and an agentic workflow, you get a real conversational kind of experience that you can talk to it just as you would. So it's a little bit better than the traditional conversational AI, to where you had intents and slot filling. To worry about entities, all that kind of stuff, to whereas the power behind a large language model gives it the ability to not only be able to speak in multiple languages, but also it doesn't really care that much about typos, which is good for me. So there are a few different voices to select from. The avatar is going to get more expressive over time to do more gestures and that sort of thing. And then we'll show you how to integrate it with the other Azure services today. And the other thing to note that's really important for some of the customers we've been talking to about the avatars is accessibility. Because sometimes chatbots can be a little intimidating to maybe an older person, or maybe like one of our retail customers, they have a solution that we're going to build for them where they're going to put an avatar in their retail locations because they may not have somebody staff that speaks the language that the customer is needing. And when they go up to the avatar, they can talk in about any language, and it'll speak back in that same language as well, which we'll show you here in a minute. So we're going to walk through the Azure Speech Studio real quick, and I'll show you how to access the Speech Studio here. Let me pull it up. So if you want to get started with the avatar, if you've not been into Speech Studio, it's a really cool platform. The avatar is obviously a great feature, but also the content creation, so you can make prompts and then put them in your videos, things like that. But the avatar is right up here on top, so the live chat avatar. Once you have that loaded, there's kind of a sample video and some sample code that you can use to kind of get started with it. But then if you go over to the try on your own, you can set it to your cognitive speech service. I think right now it's only available in West US 2. But you can select your voice, select your character, because there are multiple characters here. And that's going to be growing. The character list is going to be growing as time moves on. And just give it a try. There's also a GitHub link here too to show you some samples. So there's 2 different examples here, both written in JavaScript and in HTML. So that's the studio portion again, the different avatars and different voices that are available. So we're going to talk a little bit about why we built this. Well, actually, I built it because I was bored, but I'll tell you why we're actually using it into our booths for a few different reasons. One of them being the staffing challenges is pretty difficult for some of these booths because you get a lot of people talking and can take up time, and then having an avatar be able to speak in multiple languages really helps with that situation. And also just kind of the wow factor. So there's, in the hub over here, there's a ton of different vendors out there, and trying to get somebody to come into our booth to see something new that they haven't seen before in the other booths was a really big winner for us as well. We can also show how we can use avatars and agentic workflows to solve real problems. Like one of our problems we have in the booth is when we have a barista in the booth, we usually only have like one barista at a time. And if you have a really long line of people waiting, take an order for the barista, that line can get backed up, and then orders can get kind of confused as she's going, as the barista, try to keep the order straight. So what we actually did with this is we allow customers to come up and order their coffee with the avatar, and then we have a little portal that sits by the barista, and she can actually go in and manage the orders as we go. And then also, it allows it to do, if somebody wants to check on their order, they can come back up to the avatar or even load it on their phone and check on their order status to see when their order is finished. And again, kind of that novelty factor. People, when they come up and talk with it, I get all kinds of responses, everything from, oh, well, that's cool, to, okay, that's creepy. So it runs a pretty wide range there. So this is a solution that we built. So using AI natural languages, we could have a regular conversation without very much programming. I think when you see the agent configuration that we have with, we actually use LangChain for this integration. It's not a ton of code and not very complicated. Now all the stuff that goes around it, like the front end and the WebSocket server, that can get kind of complicated. But again, if you're trying to do this with traditional conversational AI, defining all the intents and entities can be kind of cumbersome, to whereas with a large language models, we don't really have to do that very much. So we're going to try to do a live demo here of our avatar, and if not, we have a video recording of it as well. All right, so we do have multiple events that we use this for, so we're going to go down to Ignite here, and you'll get to meet Meg. She's a little slow this morning. Come on, Meg. Well, she doesn't want to talk to me. Try that one more time here. I think that idled out there. It is working in the booth, so we'll see if it loads. There she is.
Hello, my name is Meg, and I'm your virtual assistant for Microsoft Ignite 2024. I can help you with information about sessions, CDW, and more. How can I help you today?
So one thing to note about this, you'll see me click on the recognition button here, and that's because with everybody in the booth and like all those surrounding ambient noise, it's really hard to keep a continuous listening session going. So we found it a little easier to just have a button. I think the next progression from that would be having a microphone with a mute button, keep it muted until somebody's ready to speak. But it doesn't really hinder kind of the workflow. Hey, Meg, I am here giving a session talking about you, actually. You want to say hi to everybody in the session?
Oh, that's awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Meg, your virtual assistant for Microsoft Ignite 2024. I'm here to help you with any questions about sessions, CDW, and more. Enjoy the session and feel free to interact with me at booth number 338. Have a great time.
So again, also multilingual. Hey, Meg, can you say that again in Japanese?
Sure. Here it is in Japanese. こんにちは、皆さん。私の名前はメグです。 マイクロソフト Ignite 2024のバーチャルアシスタントとして、セッションや CDW についての質問にお答えします。セッションを楽しんで、ブース番号338で私と交流してくださいね。楽しい時間を過ごしてください。
I think that's right. We'll see. Let's see. Let's order a coffee now. Hey, Meg, I'd like to order a coffee. Can you help me out?
Of course. I'd be happy to help you with that. Could you please tell me your first name and your coffee order?
Meg, I'm your creator, Nathan, and I would like to order a cafe mocha with 2% milk.
Great news, Nathan. Your order number is 97. Your cafe mocha with 2% milk is being prepared and will be ready shortly.
And then
Enjoy your coffee.
I'll show you where those orders go here in a minute. So we can ask any question. In addition to like making the coffee order, we have a couple different tools in this agentic workflow, which we'll go through. One of the tools is Bing. So we have a custom Bing search engine that she has access to. So she's able to go look up for information if it's not in the training data or if it's not in some of the other tools, she can just go out to Bing and get responses back. And we do have Bing locked down to right now for this event to search anything on Microsoft.com and also CDW.com. One of the cool things is we can also ask about products that are on our website or services. The other tool we have is we have this thing at CDW called the CDW Vault, which is all of our service offerings for sellers and customer-facing documentation. And we have all that stuff in Azure AI Search with a vectorized data storage. So we took everything we had in the Vault that's on SharePoint, processed all those documents up, chunked them, processed embeddings, and loaded them up to Azure AI Search.
Ready to explore the latest IT innovations?
It's not your turn yet. So we can ask a couple questions here. Hey, Meg, tell me about the Microsoft and CDW partnership.
The partnership between Microsoft and CDW is all about leveraging each other's strengths to provide top-notch technology.
We have a stop speaking button too, which is awesome because she can get kind of long-winded there. So we can do some other things like we can ask a question or even something silly. Hey, Meg, can you write me a song about Microsoft Ignite?
Oh, a song about Microsoft Ignite sounds like fun. Here's a little tune for you. Verse 1. In the heart of tech, we gather bright. At Microsoft Ignite, oh, what a sight. Innovators, creators.
Not a very good singer yet, but I'm sure that feature is coming. And then we can also check on our coffee order as well. Hey, Meg, my coffee order was 96. Can you give me the status?
Hey, Nathan, it looks like your coffee order number 96 is completed and ready for pickup. Enjoy your drink.
It's going to be cold, but whatever. So let me show you what we have on the barista side, and then we'll continue on here. So on the barista side here, what happens is we actually take those coffee orders and we put them into a Mongo database. Our backend, which we'll go through in a little bit more detail, is a WebSocket. So every time there's a change in the Mongo database, we're always monitoring for changes. It grabs all the orders and sends them out to all of the clients like this. So if we had multiple stations, multiple baristas, there's no problem. And this also helps the barista keep track of orders. So I'm just, this other one, I'm gonna just cancel that one. That's one I made earlier. So let's go back to the presentation a little bit. So video we'll skip.
My name is Meg, and I'm your...
So actually, let me switch back over here. One quick.
Hi there. Let's chat about how CDW...
We also, just for to keep the WebSocket alive, we have a ticker that runs every 60 seconds. And it goes out to the agent in the back end and asks it to give a random response. Just kind of keep people engaged and more importantly, keeping that WebSocket up. And also, there's actually two socket connections. There's a RTCP peer connection that connects to the Azure Cognitive Services for the actual avatar. And then there's one for our backend as well. But there's another little feature here that goes with my next slide. Hey, Meg, tell me about Nathan Cartwright.
Nathan Cartwright is the chief architect for AI in the CDW Digital Velocity practice. He is also speaking at Microsoft Ignite 2024 in a session called Revolutionizing Customer Experience, where he'll showcase the Azure Text-to-Speech avatar. Just a heads up, he might use a mix of cheap jokes and self-deprecating humor to keep the audience engaged and to get those high ratings. Enjoy his session.
It's pretty accurate. And I'll show you the actual prompt I wanted her to speak, and she actually made it a little nicer than what I wanted her to do. The last tool we have is on the Ignite webpage for the session catalog, it's just an API in the backend that we can query. So you can also ask about sessions as well. Hey, Meg, tell me about any AI sessions that are going on tomorrow.
Oh, there are some exciting AI sessions happening tomorrow at Microsoft Ignite. Here's a look. Explore AI reports in Azure AI Foundry.
So you might be asking, as a large language model, how does it know what tomorrow's date is? I'll show you here in a moment as well. So let's go back here. And so this is the actual prompt that I wanted her to say. I'm a mediocre presenter and the cheap joke things, but as you see, the large language model kind of cleaned that up a little bit and gave a little cleaner response. Not so mean is what I actually told her to say. So that's kind of nice there. If you want to interact with Meg, you can go to our booth 338 or do that QR code there, and you can talk to her on your phone. Just be polite to the barista, not like order coffee, don't pick it up. But you can ask questions about CDW, about Ignite, everything that you want to know about CDW as well. So I showed you the ordering. Did everybody get that? Let me go back here. Anybody else want to scan that? All right. So again, here's a dashboard. So again, it kind of keeps track of the orders. And also one thing that when the baristas work an event, they usually have to report on like how many drinks that they made. So it's another way we can actually keep track of how many drinks they're making for them, kind of make that process a little easier for them. So let's look a little bit behind the scenes. So what is making this all work? The front end is a React application. So we're using the Azure Cognitive Services SDK for JavaScript, which includes the speech recognition and the text-to-speech. So we'll show you how that's set up as well. And so what happens on the front end, actually we'll get into that on the next slide here. The back end, what we have is that we just have an Express website server that is in Azure App Services. Just no container or anything. Azure App Services is able to run that Node.js app just natively. We have Cosmo DB running the Mongo version in there for conversation history. With the WebSocket, it's not totally necessary for persistence in like a Mongo database, for instance. But if we are doing a HTTP connection, like a streaming REST API, then for each turn of the conversation, we'd have to have some place to store that conversation so she can pick up where we left off. Because as you know, with large language models, when you're doing a chatbot, those prompts kind of grow, and that's how keeping the context alive. We are using LangChain. It's the OpenAI's tool agent, so we're not using their LangGraph for this particular demo, which we're going around and kind of updating all the other code for all the other events to use LangGraph. Makes it a little bit easier. A couple of the cool things that you get with Azure OpenAI, and the model we're using is GPT-4o, is parallel function calling as well. So if one thing we could do for like a date and time is we can have a tool for the agent to actually go look up a date and time. And then, if we're asking about sessions for tomorrow, the LLM can actually say, okay, I want to call first a date and time tool. And then I want to take that information, then call the next tool available. So we can do multiple things at once. We do have some the custom tools that we'll show you for like coffee ordering. Again, we're using the Ignite API, which I'm glad that was open and able to use. And then again, custom Bing search engine, and then Azure AI search is in there too for our vectorization. So this is kind of the map, very, very, very high level of what goes on here. So we expand this out a little bit. So we have the top is our front end, and then the bottom there is the back end. So we have the user requests coming in, then we go process it through Azure speech recognition. And so when we get the response back, we send that over to the back end to our LangChain agent. When you first turn, when she first pops on the screen, she introduces herself. So the first thing she does is she'll send the front end just sends a message that says how you introduce yourself. That's kind of how we get the introduction message there. And then there's actually more tools that she can pick from here as well. But if you're doing Bing, we go out to retrieve information from Bing. If we want to order a coffee or check the status, we go to those tools. And then once we get the information from those tools, then we send it to the large language model, which is, in this case, GPT-4o, to actually process all the information that's coming back. So the top part, the front end, is all speech driven. Back end is all text. The one little caveat, even with good prompt engineering, is if I were to ask Meg, hey, can you hear me? She'll reply, yes, I can see what you wrote clearly. Just even with good prompt engineering, the LLM doesn't quite know it's a speech application just yet, regardless of what I do for prompting. But not a big deal there. But there is a division there. With I don't know if everybody's seen or not, but the Azure OpenAI, the GPT real-time, GPT-4 real-time is out. So we're probably going to try to change this around to support that. There's also GitHub repos out there for that as well. So that kind of mimics the ChatGPT demo they did, where they can actually interrupt and get quicker responses back from the LLM. There's actually a middleware piece where we're thinking of putting the actual LangChain agent. If you go to the GitHub repo right now, it's just a kind of a RAG scenario, but we could probably easily replace that with our agent. The other thing that is supported now too, which we haven't implemented in this one, is streaming responses. So you can stream tokens, get a little faster response. But what we found is since this is all in Azure, everything that it needs to work is in Azure, the response times are relatively quick. So some things about the agentic workflows that are becoming really popular. I don't know about your news feed, but mine, all I hear about is agentic architecture and people doing different ones. Like Copilot's got a bunch of agentic workflows in there as well. We can enhance capabilities all the way around, like with Meg here, to kind of make that customer experience a little more personal and easier to program too. The other benefit is like task automation. So in addition to Meg here, we have a demo that we actually tied together with Splunk. So I actually came from a Cisco background way back when, and I worked on the collaboration platforms. And one of the things that always annoyed me is the alerts that got sent to Splunk or any syslog server. They really meant nothing, and you had to go and spend time researching them and digging through the bug toolkit. Well, what we actually did is we created a agentic workflow with a supervisor and gave it like sub-agents. And then when the alert comes in to the supervisor, it has a research agent. And so actually we'll go out, take that alert, do all the root cause analysis, try to figure out what happened, what the error actually means. And there's a couple other agents in there too, like one to put in the ServiceNow ticket automatically, and there's another one that will actually send a message to the appropriate team, and also can spin up a huddle room real quick for everybody to hop on and try to fix it. So in addition to having tools like for ordering coffee, retrieval augmented generation, that kind of stuff, really helpful all the way across the business org as well. GPT-4, 4.0, and even the new one that just came out, 0.1, I believe, So it does a lot of problem solving. So like I mentioned, you probably saw in the transcription of when I spoke, sometimes Recognizer will get some of the words wrong, or it will maybe use the wrong word, but GPT-4 is able to kind of decipher that. And so that's why I said typos don't really matter a whole lot, as long as there's enough context to be able to, to glean what the user is actually wanting to do. Decision making. So again, setting up the right tools to be used in which order, including that parallel function calling I was talking about before. So some of the core tasks of an LLM are things like translation, summarization, question answering, creative writing, and we can really exploit some of this with Create Meg here, or even in other workflows. Like we have another demo that we actually did for our marketing team that takes in, like we can just give it an agent a website on cwp.com. And we can have it go through, for a particular product, and it'll go through and write a script for a video. We use another service that will actually create a video out of stock images, another service for text-to-speech, and we have an agent that puts it all together and then sends our marketing team back a video they can put on the website for the product. And of course, that's also kind of a revenue generating feature as well for our partners to use that service. So I think I've talked about a lot of this stuff already, as I wanted to get into some code here. So if you don't really know the workflow for how agents work and how they use tools, so this is kind of the basic setup here, at, again, a really high level. So the user query comes in. Actually, we can go do it like this. The user query comes in and gets processed either just sends plain text or go through speech recognition like what we did with Meg. And it goes to the LLM. And then there's actually a system prompt in there as well, which we'll get to, that kind of gives the instructions and the persona that it's supposed to have. So it combines the user query with the system prompt. And then, okay, here we go. So it takes everything and makes a comprehensive prompt. And then it sends it over to the LLM to get a response. So like when we first start Meg up, like I said, the front end sends a message automatically once everything is up and running that says, hi, introduce yourself. So then the LLM then sends that back. But if, let's say we're ordering coffee, we will send that request, like, hey, I want to order a coffee. And then in the tools list, which we'll get to in a minute, has all the tools and like what they're used for, the names of the tools, and actually the argument schema that's supposed to follow to actually use those tools. So the LangChain will take that information that comes to the LLM, which tells it the tool name and the arguments to use. It'll execute those tools and return that information back to the LLM for it to process its next response to the user. And so here we have the response coming back to the user, and then that's kind of the overall workflow. So again, the LLM doesn't actually call any tool, so there's no like Skynet action here. It can actually execute anything. It's still a pragmatic approach on your backend with your agent and your tool set. All right, so let's get a little nerdy here. So we're going to shut Meg down here so she doesn't interrupt. First thing I'm going to show you is our front end a little bit here. So this section, there's a whole lot more here. There's like state management stuff, some references, and all the typical React stuff, which we won't get into. And then I am a good coder. I comment my code, even though I just did the comments last night for your benefit. They're in there still, so I should get credit for that. So the first thing we do is, and you can actually see some of this in that GitHub repo if you go to the Speech Studio. I kind of base this off of what the Azure team put together already. The first thing we do here is we're specifying what languages we're going to actually recognize. And in here, we have a few pretty broad ones. I did find out today I need to add Hungarian in there, and I'll do that. The next thing we do is we set up the speech synthesizer, so the actual text-to-speech service which actually goes out to the voice, takes in SSML, and then sends that to the avatar. And then here's where we configure the actual avatar configuration, which provides the video, with all the lip moving and gestures, all that sort of thing. And then just kind of tie it all together here. So when speech recognition is enabled, we're using like constant, even though we turn it off after we get a response, we go in and we send that to our backend here, and then we set the caption so that you see that above the avatar. And then for like the random messages that she comes up with, we have this a little clock here. So for every 60 seconds, we'll send a message to pull an idle response from the back end, send it over, and then it will speak that. So nothing overly crazy going on with the front end, just typical React stuff and some JavaScript. Some of the fun comes into the actual agent and the tools. So again, like I mentioned, we have an Express app that we're running the WebSocket on. And we got a few routes here. So whenever a coffee order is added or updated, by the barista going through and selecting the status of the order, we actually are monitoring that Cosmo MongoDB, and we actually take those changes and push them out to all of the front-end clients that are using the barista interface. Down below here, we do have several potential routes to go to, or different functions for different things. Like if you want to create a new event that our marketing team can use, if we want to get the orders, like for the front-end component, update order status, create order, and then if we actually go through and build the agent with the event ID, so that's in the state. And then for the agent call, we actually go over to this avatar handler here. And for here, what I did is I just created a class. So when the front end first loads, the first thing it does is sends a message type of token. So that will go out and get all of the ICE servers and the peer connection for the avatar image in the speech. And then once we have that, we send it back to the front end. The next thing it does is we actually build the agent with all the tools in there, and next thing we'll do is walk through that code. And then so that agent is persistent in the state as long as that WebSocket is up. But if we did want to do HTTP with streaming responses, we take that state and we sort into like MongoDB, or one of their demos we have for like off-prem or like offline. We have a PG vector and Postgres to store like the state information in. And then when we call the agent, we simply do agent execute, put in the input. It comes from the user. One thing to note, and you'll actually see this in our prompt that we have that she runs off of, is LLMs love Markdown language. So I don't know if you've seen like ChatGPT or even Copilot. The way you get the formatting is the LLM actually spits out Markdown language. And so what you want to do in the response, because sometimes you'll get like a list, or you'll get like the hashtag, or like for like headers and stuff, and we just want to take that all out. So what we did is there's a package called remove markdown that we actually pass the response in from the large language model. This is take all that stuff out, so we don't get any funny responses coming back. And then we just send that response back to the front end. So we do have a couple random messages to send. So all these were created with the large language model as well. So we just asked, you told us what we were doing, and we just needed some responses, both for errors and for just random responses to keep the connection alive. So we have those set up here. Now the fun part, the actual agent. So if you're not familiar with LangChain, one of the reasons we use it is because it's compatible with pretty much every cloud provider, and even on-prem that we use for our customers. Just kind of makes development a little easier. And like a good coder, there is no key or credentials in my code. We are using the Azure Key Vault to keep all that information in there. So in addition to the LLM, like GPT-4o, we have embeddings. So if we need to go to Azure AI Search, first thing we have to do is process the user request into embeddings before we go to Azure AI Search, since all those documents are vectorized. The date thing I mentioned before, again, LLMs have no idea what date is. So what we did is we actually created a date time string and injected that into the prompt dynamically. So every run, it has not only the current date, but the current time as well. So you could go in and ask what sessions are available in like an hour or the next 2 hours, or however you want to mix those up, and you give enough context so it can actually adjust its search results or the arguments it sends to the tools to be able to process that. So here's our prompt. Again, I mentioned that large language models love Markdown, so I kind of took advantage of that a bit. And I structured my prompt in Markdown language as well, which seems to work really well because things that are important, you'll see they'll have like the double asterisks around them to tell it that it's important to pay attention to that. And it also kind of helps you organize your prompts because some of these can get pretty large depending on what you're wanting to do. So the first thing we have here at the top is we give it a name and persona and what its purpose is. We give it a date and time so we can get the most updated information and for people to ask questions that involve a date and time. We give it some simple instructions. Most of the time, the tool descriptions that we'll show you are enough, but I had a problem to where sometimes she would just say, I put your coffee order in, but it wouldn't give an order number. So that kind of told me it wasn't using the tool. So we just kind of reminded it if someone's ordering coffee, you got to get their first name. If we wanted to add on to that and say, get the first name of the company, it always will follow those instructions, and then we always tell it which tool to use. Give it like how to greet users, and then just some extra stuff in here. So we have to remind it to keep conversational, to make it seem a little bit more natural. So we tell it that we can use colloquialisms like oh, okay, well, just kind of get that more natural feeling. And of course, with the LLM, we actually have the temperature turned up to like 0.9 to kind of get that better mixture of tokens. We want to make sure we have clarity and accuracy, make sure they're easy to understand and correct. If something happens to where you're asking a question about CDW or like a product or something about Microsoft, we tell her to suggest going out to the websites for that particular company. Stay within your scope, so don't answer anything if it doesn't have to do with CDW or Microsoft. Very important so people don't come up and try to ask weird questions because it happens more than you think. So it kind of keeps her in scope. And again, reminding her that you're a voice assistant, try not to use Markdown language or lists. And then again, we give it the booth number in case somebody wants to go talk to it, maybe on their phone, then we go see it in the booth, they can. So here we just have a prompt. So the kind of prompt thing changes in LangGraph, which is the next iteration of LangChain. So again, we have our LLM set up here. Temperature 0.9, which gives you a better mixture of tokens. We do have our Cosmo MongoDB set up for conversation memory. And then we build our tools here. And then we create the agent and the executor with memory and all that kind of stuff in there. Let's take a quick look at the tools, and we'll stop for some questions here. So here are the tools that we have available for the agent. So my little tool here kind of give myself a hard time, which she wouldn't do. So we can call that tool. So as you can see here, we have the tool name and a description. And so that's how the LLM actually determines which tool to use. So it will match the user query with the tool description in order to pick the tool. And then if you have arguments to put in there, you can actually put a schema in there for the arguments, tell her what those arguments are for. So here's how we connected to the Ignite API to get session information. So we just go through here. We take in the user query. You can see this is a structured tool. So we do have a class that specifies the schema with the arguments and what they're all for. And then to save on tokens, so the token list doesn't get too incredibly long, we created a little function here to just clean that up and only get the relevant information that we actually need to send back to the LLM to answer questions. We're just using Axios to handle that. For the Azure AI Search, we have another structured tool here to where we are setting up our Azure AI Search client with our database name or our index. We give it a description of when you use it. We get the user query in here, process that through embeddings, and then we send it to the search, and then we kind of clean up those search results again, just get relevant information, and send that back to the LLM. So when you ask like what kind of coffee you have, we have the schema set up here for the coffee, so the available drinks, and then we need a customer name and description of what everything means, and that's how the avatar knows what kind of drinks we have and knows what's required. So for example, everything in here that doesn't have optional next to it is required, so like you have to have milk option. As well. So that's how we should get all the information before sending it to the tool. Here's a create tool, create order function. That just simply goes into the Mongo database. Our backend monitors that document for any kind of changes, sends those out to the front ends, and then the update order tool is pretty much the same. So I will kind of stop there, and just for any kind of questions that anybody might have. Yes.
I have maybe a couple questions. So you mentioned that the large language models love Markdown.
Mm-hmm.
Have you? I saw in your code you use Markdown for prompt.
Yeah.
Have you compared the effect of that versus the plain prompt?
Yeah. So the Markdown gives you a couple different thing, provides you a couple of things. It keeps your prompt kind of organized so you don't get lost. Because I've built prompts before for different iterations that kind of got like, conflicting instructions, so it helps you keep organized. But also I've found if there's something important that it needs to follow, having it in Markdown language, it seems to respond better with Markdown. And we've tried both, and I seem to have much more success with Markdown.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned this real-time API. Do you know if Microsoft going to change the samples using the real-time API anytime soon?
So the real-time API is available now. I think it's in preview currently, and there's actually a sample application of just speech that will actually stream from the GPT-4 real-time. So that's in preview right now. You can go and use it.
Okay. And last question: Do you plan to make your code public?
I'm waiting to hear back from our IP attorneys because, big company thing. If they let me, I will publish that out there. I don't think there's anything too crazy in there, but I should hear back from them here
All right, thank you.
this week. Yep. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just with the TTS and the language it supports, does that support any accent? For example, when it comes to English, does it support New Zealand or Australian English or anything like that?
Yeah, so it depends on what voice you're using. So if you're using one of the multilingual voices, a lot of them will have like British, English, British, American, Canadian. Even the same thing with Spanish, you'll see different accents in there as well.
Cool. The other question is with the avatar itself, I'm thinking something around like if I wanted to create my own sort of unique avatar for the brand, which is going to represent the brand, is it going to be something that's going to Microsoft offer down the line sometime? So
it is available now. The process is pretty manual, so they give you instructions on how to record the video, because it does have to be based on a real person. You can do a character mock-up too in like Unity and Unreal Engine. There's a few customers have done that. Then you have to send that in, and they actually will put everything together, like the green screen, things like that, take out the background. But I was told yesterday that process is becoming more automated, and it's kind of the next iterations that I think sometime either end of this year or next year, that'll be available to make that process a little smoother.
Cool, thanks. Just the last question. I promise that's going to be the last question. With the pay-as-you-go, how does it work? So when the customer is interacting with the avatar, is that only when you get charged, or
Yeah, so everything is serverless, so like there's no like compute charge in there. So there's a few different costs to consider. There's the token consumption, so you have input-output tokens to consider, speech recognition, and there's the text-to-speech, which are all relatively low, like pennies, like less than a penny on the dollar. So you do have to kind of consider that. But we actually have been running this for a while, and I've not seen a bill get above like $30 for an event, if that. So. Yeah, yeah.
But that
And,
will
and like Cisco, we took it to Cisco Live, and we took 350 coffee orders, and it was like less than $20 to run it for the week. Yeah. Yeah.
That will be multiplied by whatever number of concurrent sessions going
Yeah.
on as well.
Yep.
Thank
Exactly.
you very much.
Yep. All right. I think we're out of time here. So thank you very much, and hope that was helpful. Thank you.